They told her to move for a more important passenger. She obeyed, hiding the scars on her hands and the metal beneath her shirt. 10 minutes later, the pilot emerged, and saluted her. The sterile, recycled air of Flight 815 from Denver to Seattle did little to calm the quiet hum of anxiety in Major Arya Volkov's chest. At 43, she moved with an economy of motion that spoke of a life lived by discipline. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back into a severe, immaculate bun, and her faded olive-green flight jacket, a relic from another life, was zipped up high. It concealed the thin chain and the weight of the Air Force cross that rested against her sternum. "Good afternoon, ma'am." "Seat 1F, on your right," a flight attendant chirped, her smile bright and practiced. Arya nodded, her gaze sweeping over the first-class cabin. In Seat 1A, a young man she mentally catalogued as a tech bro, Kyle, perhaps, was loudly pontificating into his AirPods about a new NFT drop. "It's about disrupting the very concept of ownership, brah," he declared to the unfortunate soul on the other end of the call. He wore an ostentatious gold watch and an air of unearned importance. Slipping into her window seat, Arya allowed herself a small, private ritual. She ran her thumb along the inside of her jacket, feeling the rough texture of embroidered initials stitched into the lining, a silent roll call for the fallen. She closed her eyes, seeking the practiced calm she could usually summon on command. The low thrum of the auxiliary power unit was a familiar sound, a baseline to the ordered world of aviation. She had nearly found a quiet space when a polite cough brought her back. "Excuse me, ma'am." Arya opened her eyes to see a young flight attendant, her name tag reading, Chloe. Her expression was a careful blend of apology and professional firmness. "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience," Chloe began, her voice lowered. "But we have a situation with a platinum member. He has an urgent family matter and specifically needs a window seat to stay in communication. We need to move you to a different seat." Kyle, the tech bro, glanced over, a flicker of smug satisfaction in his eyes before he turned back to his conversation. He was the platinum member. Arya understood instantly. The family matter was likely a server crashing or a deal closing. There was no negotiation in Chloe's tone, only expectation. Years of training kicked in. You don't question a direct order, even a polite one. You assess, adapt, and execute. Arguing would create a scene, and drawing attention was the last thing Arya ever wanted. "Of course," Arya replied, her voice even. She swung her single carry-on from the overhead bin with fluid efficiency, the movement betraying a subtle stiffness in her back that few would ever notice. "Thank you so much for your understanding," Chloe said, visibly relieved. "I'll escort you to your new seat. It's 24B. As Chloe led her through the curtain separating the classes, Arya felt a dozen pairs of eyes on her. It was the walk of shame, a quiet eviction. She passed Kyle's assistant, already seated in premium economy, typing furiously on a laptop. They were clearing the way for their king. Seat 24B was a middle seat in the densest part of the cabin. On her left, a man was already manspreading into her designated territory. On her right, a teenager's headphones leaked the tinny beat of some indecipherable rap song. The air back here was thicker, a cocktail of perfume, stale air, and the faint scent of someone's fast food lunch. Arya settled in, stowing her bag and making herself smaller. She buckled her seatbelt and closed her eyes again, ignoring the assistant next to her who was now taking up a portion of her armrest. She began her internal mantra, a technique her therapist had taught her. 5 things you can see: the blue of the seat fabric, the scuff on the plastic tray, the crack in the window shade, the light reflecting off the wing, the exit sign. The ritual was a tether, pulling her back from the edge of memories that the low hum of the engines always threatened to unleash. The first hour of the flight was a study in minor miseries. The man to her left fell asleep, his head lolling onto her shoulder. The teenager to her right began a rhythmic, unconscious knee jiggle that vibrated through the entire row. The child in the seat behind her, engrossed in a game on a tablet with the volume at max, periodically kicked the back of her seat for emphasis. Arya endured it all with the stoic patience of someone who had weathered far worse. When the drink cart finally arrived, the flight attendant apologized. "I'm sorry, we're out of still water. We just have sparkling or Coke." "Coke is fine, thank you," Arya said. As the attendant passed her the plastic cup, the plane hit a pocket of unexpected turbulence. The cup jumped, and ice-cold liquid sloshed down the front of Arya's olive jacket. The sudden, shocking cold was a physical jolt. For a split second, she wasn't on Flight 815. She was waist-deep in the freezing, fast-moving waters of a river in the Zarafshan Valley, the icy current trying to tear a wounded airman from her grasp. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry," the attendant exclaimed, fumbling with a wad of napkins. "It's nothing," Arya said, her voice a little tight as she blinked the memory away. "It's just a jacket." She took the napkins and methodically dabbed at the dark stain, her hand steady despite the adrenaline spike. A few rows ahead, a young man in a crisp, sand-colored t-shirt watched the interaction. He had the sharp haircut and alert posture of a military cadet. His name was Leo Sanchez, an airman cadet on his way to his first assignment at Joint Base Lewis McChord. He'd noticed the woman when she was brought back from first class. He'd seen her quiet dignity, the way she made herself small to avoid friction. Now, as she cleaned the spill, her jacket sleeve pulled up slightly, revealing her wrist. For just a moment, Leo saw it. Faint, grayed with age, but unmistakable to someone who had spent the last year studying military heraldry, the corner of a tattoo. A broken arrow, wrapped in a single wing. It was the unofficial insignia of a legendary pararescue unit, whispered about in forums and training barracks. A unit that technically didn't exist. Leo's curiosity piqued. He pulled out his phone, shielding the screen. He typed, "Broken Arrow Wing Tattoo," into a search engine. The top results were military forums. He clicked on one, a thread titled, "Myths and Legends of the PJs." He scrolled down, past stories of impossible rescues, until he found it. An anonymous post from 5 years ago. "You want a legend? Ask about Raven in the Zarafshan Valley. Black Hawk down in a box canyon, surrounded. Raven was the only PJ on the ground. 3 trips into the kill zone. Pulled 7 men out while calling in her own air support. They say she carried the last one out on her back for 2 clicks through an ice-cold river under fire. The brass tried to bury it, too many special ops elements involved. But the guys who were there, they know. They say she got the cross for it." The post included a heavily redacted, low-resolution photo from a gun camera. A lone figure, dragging another, their face obscured. But the profile, the set of the jaw, the way they moved. Leo's breath caught. He zoomed in on the figure's temple. A faint line, a scar, exactly where he could now see a similar pale scar tracing from the woman's hairline to her eyebrow. His heart pounded. It couldn't be. He looked up from his phone, his eyes wide with disbelief, and met Arya's gaze. She had been watching him, her expression unreadable but her eyes sharp, analytical. She knew that he knew. Leo quickly looked away, his face flushing. He nudged the cadet sitting next to him and showed him the phone. His friend's eyes widened, and both of them looked back at the quiet woman in seat 24B, no longer seeing a displaced passenger, but a ghost from a bedtime story told to warriors. The atmosphere around Arya had shifted. The air, once merely stuffy, was now charged with a silent, spreading awareness. She could feel the glances from Leo and his friend, the way they sat straighter, their boyish fidgeting gone. She sank deeper into her seat, pulling her jacket tighter, wishing she could disappear into the upholstery. The plane completed its long, winding taxi and paused at the threshold of the main runway, the roar of a preceding jet fading into the distance. This was the moment of transition, the pause before the violent, controlled ascent. The flight attendants made their final pass, their voices a low murmur of "seatbelts fastened, tray tables up." Then, instead of the expected surge of power, the engine spooled down. The deep roar softened to a low, electric hum. A heavy, unnatural stillness fell over the aircraft, punctuated by the sharp ding of the seatbelt sign being switched off. Confused murmurs rippled through the cabin. "What's going on?" a woman behind Arya whispered. "Is it a mechanical issue?" The tech bro, Kyle, huffed in annoyance. "Unbelievable. I have a 4 p.m. hard out." Then, a voice came over the intercom, calm and authoritative, with a gravity that cut through the anxious chatter. It was a woman's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I apologize for the delay. We've just received some information that requires my immediate personal attention. Please remain in your seats. We'll be on our way shortly." The vague explanation only fueled the speculation. Security? A medical emergency? The cockpit door swung open. A woman in a crisp pilot's uniform emerged. Her silver hair was styled in a short, no-nonsense cut, and her face, framed by the uniform's sharp collar, was one of composed authority. This was Captain Eva Rostova. She didn't pause to speak to the first-class crew. She began walking down the aisle with a steady, purposeful stride that commanded attention. Passengers craned their necks. The cabin grew quiet, the only sound a soft whir of the ventilation. Captain Rostova walked past first class, her eyes fixed forward. She passed Kyle, who looked up from his phone with an expression of impatient inquiry, which she completely ignored. She passed the curtain into premium economy, and then kept going. Her path was straight, her focus absolute. She was a missile locked onto a target. Arya felt her heart rate quicken. That name. Rostova. It was an echo from a half-remembered briefing, a name connected to a face in a dossier. A young lieutenant, trapped in the twisted metal of a downed Black Hawk, calling for his mother as he lost consciousness. Her son. The captain stopped. She stood in the narrow aisle directly adjacent to row 24, her polished black shoes perfectly aligned with the seat. She stood over the quiet woman in the middle seat, the one who had been moved for a more important passenger. The entire aircraft held its breath. In the tomb-like silence of the cabin, Captain Eva Rostova stood before Arya. She straightened her posture, her shoulders squared, and executed a flawless, razor-sharp military salute. Her hand sliced through the air and stopped, quivering with precision, just beside her eyebrow. "Major Arya Volkov," she said, her voice ringing with a formal clarity that carried to every corner of the plane. "Call sign, Raven." Arya's training took over. Her back straightened, her chin lifted. She was no longer a passenger in a cramped middle seat, she was a major in the United States Air Force being addressed by a superior officer. Captain Rostova held the salute, her gaze locked on Arya. She then turned her head slightly to address the captive audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice thick with an emotion that vibrated beneath the professional veneer. 9 years ago, in a canyon in the Zarafshan Valley, a Black Hawk helicopter carrying a special operations team was shot down. For 6 hours, they were surrounded, wounded, and taking heavy fire. They were written off as lost. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Then this woman, Major Volkov, a pararescue jumper, was the sole operator inserted onto the scene. Over the next 3 hours, under constant enemy fire, she single-handedly orchestrated a rescue. She made 3 separate trips into the wreckage, triaging the wounded, administering life-saving aid, and carrying them to a defensible position, all while directing air support that saved the entire company. Every eye was now on Arya. Kyle, the tech bro, sat bolt upright, his jaw slack with disbelief and dawning shame. Chloe, the young flight attendant, had both hands clasped over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror at what she had done. For these actions, Captain Rostova continued, her voice cracking slightly, Major Volkov was awarded the Air Force Cross, our nation's second highest award for valor in combat. An honor she wears beneath her shirt because she is a hero who never seeks the spotlight. The captain finally lowered her salute and gestured toward Arya. She personally saved the lives of 7 men that day. One of them was my son, Lieutenant Alexei Rostova. A collective gasp swept through the aircraft. The story was no longer just a tale of abstract heroism, it was personal, immediate, and standing right there in the aisle. Slowly, with practiced discipline, Arya unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. Her posture shifted automatically into parade rest. "I was just doing my job, Captain," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not according to my son," Rostova replied, her eyes glistening. "Or any of the other men who came home to their families because of you." From a few rows back, a figure stood up. It was the young cadet, Leo Sanchez. He snapped to attention, his own salute a little shaky but full of reverence. "Major." "Airman Cadet Leo Sanchez," he said, his voice loud in the quiet cabin. "It's an honor, ma'am." Arya gave him a slight, acknowledging nod. The sight of his earnest face seemed to break the spell. The silence erupted into a wave of sound, not loud, but a rising tide of respectful, stunned applause that started in the back and rolled forward through the entire plane. Captain Rostova turned to the mortified Chloe. "Please escort Major Volkov back to her rightful seat. In fact, clear the entire row for her." As Chloe, with tears streaming down her face, led Arya back toward the front, the aisle became a gauntlet of silent respect. Passengers reached out, not to grab, but to gently touch her arm as she passed. An elderly man with a VFW pin on his lapel nodded slowly, his eyes shining. A mother leaned over and whispered to her daughter, "See? That's what a real hero looks like." When they reached first class, Kyle was on his feet, his face pale and deeply embarrassed. "Major," he stammered, blocking her path. I had no idea. What I did, my behavior, it was unacceptable. Please, take my seat. Take my assistant's seat too. Take the whole row. No apology necessary, mister." Arya paused. "Kyle," he finished, looking smaller than he had an hour ago. "Mr. Kyle," Arya continued, her tone neutral. "And your original seat is fine." She had no desire to accept anything from him. She simply wanted her paid-for space back. As she settled into seat 1F, the soft leather felt like a world away from the cramped confines of 24B. She stared out the window, watching the ground crew, oblivious to the drama inside. She thought of Alexei Rostova, a boy barely in his 20s, unconscious and bleeding, calling for his mother in his delirium. That memory now had a face, the strong, resolute face of the woman in the cockpit. The plane finally began its powerful takeoff roll. As it climbed into the vast Colorado sky, Captain Rostova's voice came over the intercom again, this time with a lighter tone. "Well folks, now that we have our seating arrangements in proper order, we can get underway. Flight attendants, you may begin cabin service." Later, as the flight leveled off, Captain Rostova emerged from the cockpit again, this time holding a satellite phone. "Major," she said, her voice softer now. "I hope I'm not interrupting. We have a secure channel. My son would very much like to speak with you." Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. This was unexpected. She took the phone, her hand surprisingly steady. "Hello? Major Volkov?" The voice on the other end was warm and full of life, laced with a faint Russian accent inherited from his mother. "This is Alexei Rostova. I've been waiting 9 years for this." "Lieutenant," she replied, the rank leaving her lips automatically. "How are you?" He laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "It's just Alexei now. And I'm doing better than I have any right to be. Thanks to you. I'm a flight instructor now, can you believe it? At a school for disabled pilots. Helping guys who got banged up like me get their wings back. Arya felt a lump form in her throat. I heard congratulations are in order, she managed. Yeah, Alexei said, his voice softening with pride. A baby girl. Born last month. We named her Arya. The name hit her with the force of a physical blow. She closed her eyes. That's quite an honor, Alexei. It was the least we could do, he said. You gave me the chance to be a father. You gave my mother her son back. We'll see you when you land. The whole family is here. After she handed the phone back, Leo, the young cadet, approached her seat tentatively. Ma'am. I'm sorry to bother you. But my flight instructor at the academy, he was Captain Mallory. He was the co-pilot of the support helicopter that went down a few clicks from your position. You pulled him out of the fire, too. Arya remembered. Mallory, pinned by the instrument panel, his leg shattered. He told me, Leo said, his voice full of awe, that if I ever wanted to know what courage looked like, I should try to find the story of the Raven of Zarafshan. I just never thought I'd be sitting on the same plane as her. Arya looked at this young man, his face bright with idealism, and saw the unbroken chain of legacy. She pulled a small, worn, leather-bound notebook from her bag, not a journal, but a ledger. In it were names, dates, and dispositions. Her private memorial. She found the entry for Alexei Rostova. It read, critical condition, medevac. Status unknown. She uncapped a pen and, in neat, block letters, added, married. Father. Instructor. Daughter named Arya. As Flight 815 began its descent into the gray, drizzly skies of Seattle, a sense of peace settled over Arya, one she hadn't felt in years. The recognition had been uncomfortable, a violation of the anonymity she craved. But it was also, healing. The stories she carried were not just hers alone. Captain Rostova's voice filled the cabin one last time. As we approach Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, on behalf of our entire crew, I'd like to thank you for flying with us. And it has been the profound honor of my life to share this flight with Major Arya Volkov. A second round of applause, warmer and more personal this time, filled the plane. When the jet bridge connected, Captain Rostova was waiting at the door. Allow me to escort you, Major. Together, they walked down the ramp. As they stepped into the terminal, Arya saw them. A small crowd had gathered at the gate. In the center was a man in a high-tech wheelchair, his smile radiant. It was Alexei. He held a tiny, sleeping infant wrapped in a pink blanket. Beside him stood a woman with kind, strong eyes, and a whole constellation of people, survivors and their families, stood behind him. But it was the view through the massive terminal windows that made Arya stop. On the rain-slicked tarmac below, a crew of Air Force ground personnel had stopped their work. They had formed a perfect line, their orange vests and blue uniforms a slash of color against the gray concrete, and as they saw her, they stood at attention, a spontaneous, silent honor guard. Alexei wheeled forward, his eyes shining with tears. Major, he breathed. Alexei, she replied. He reached up, not for a handshake, but pulled her down into a fierce, one-armed hug. Thank you for my life, he whispered. When they parted, his wife, Sarah, stepped forward. We've wanted to meet you for so long. Then she nodded to the bundle in Alexei's arms. This is little Arya. Arya hesitated for only a second before extending her arms. She took the tiny, warm bundle. The baby stirred, her impossibly small hand flexing, and her fingers curled around Arya's index finger, right over a thick, white scar. The contrast, the infant's perfect, new skin against the map of her own violent history, was overwhelming. A life that existed because of a scar. For years, Alexei said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, I asked, why me? Why did I survive when so many didn't? I felt so guilty for being alive. Arya looked up from the baby's face. I know the feeling. "I thought you might," he said, gesturing to the families around them. "But then I realized, we don't get to know why. We just get to decide what we do with the time we're given. And you, Major, you gave us all this time." Looking at the faces in the crowd, men she'd last seen covered in blood and dirt, now standing with their spouses and children, Arya felt the immense weight on her soul shift. It didn't disappear, but it was no longer hers to carry alone. It was shared among this tribe, this family forged in fire and ice. The Air Force cross around her neck felt different now. Not a burden, but a link. A testament not to one night of violence, but to the thousands of quiet, brave days that had followed. Her war was not over, it had simply changed. The mission now was to help these heroes, and herself, navigate the peace they had fought so hard to secure. Arya's story reminds us that heroes are all around us. They don't ask for recognition, but they deserve our respect. Have you ever encountered an unsung hero in your own life? Share your story in the comments below. Comment respect. Let's honor the extraordinary people hiding in plain sight. Don't forget to subscribe and share this story to spread the message of gratitude and courage.